Hello and welcome back. So today I'm going to be discussing why I've uninstalled Age of Empires 3, the definitive edition. It's no secret that I love RTS games and it's some of my favorite in the gaming genre because you can outthink your opponent, use mechanical skills to win tight games. The rewards for winning feel satisfying. Even in losses, a tight game feels like it was a good game. You could say GG and you can take something away from the loss. However, lately in AOE3 DE, I feel the base mechanics of RTS games in the genre, the mechanics are lacking. Losses feel deflating and BS, and wins don't feel good anymore. When you work really hard and you get like a +7 elo, or you lose to somebody who you feel like is mechanically inferior and you lose like 20 elo, right? So I want to discuss in general why I feel the definitive edition is not living up to the genre of RTS. So a few universal mechanics in RTS. You need map control and resource control. You need to micromanage your military units. You need to macro your base building, economy, and production buildings. Having decent or high actions per minute allows you to out multitask your opponent using hotkeys, control groups, things of that nature. And then, of course, very unique to AOE3 is the expansive counter system. But in AOE3DE, map control, micro, macro, APM, and counters do not matter anymore. And I'll give you some examples. More or less these days, these fundamentals aren't being met, and you're just following a very robotic build order simulator, essentially. Some build orders are so incredibly powerful that it literally doesn't matter what civilization you're playing against or what the opponent is doing, you just still win. Even if you have poor micro, macro, you make mistakes, you're slow, it doesn't matter. You can still win the game because some civs are so overtuned. So going a little bit deeper, right? Map control. Ever since the Knights of the Mediterranean DLC, we've seen a stray towards turtling and not taking map control, not getting resources, not going out onto coin mines, not going out onto hunts. And a lot of civs can just do this now. For example, like Italy, they could sit in their base the entire game and not have any resources, and the architects will just be able to build farms, estates, lombards, and they can just trickle in resources or convert them however freely they see fit. Inca, another example, the Concha house boom, where they just get essentially 12 villagers idleless on food for the entire game. You have 2 hunts that start in your base and 2 mines and berry bushes with extensive trees. So you can realistically reach the latter stages of the ages, such as the industrial or in some cases imperial, without having to leave your base. And that is not something that is conducive to a fair and balanced RTS game. The opponent may be able to take the entire map, but they still won't have the same benefits that they could normally see in other RTSs. So those are just a few examples there. Now, micro and unit counters. This is the biggest thing right now, I think, that is become worse and worse. And there are certain units that overperform and they do well against their counters, or they fill too many roles. So in a game with 100 of units, the counter system is very complex and difficult to understand. But with the power creep of the definitive edition, some basic things in the game have just become too much. So for example, right, in Legacy, we had the Ashigaru Musketeer. It was one of the best musketeers in the game because of its coveted 4.5 movement speed. Now we're seeing a lot of units that are just given this default speed for no reason. The reason Ashis had 4.5 movement speed is because they had to go quickly around the map to protect their shrines, right? Strelets have 4.5 movement speed, the skirmisher for Russia, because they have low range. So to get into range, they need speed. So, and there were offsets, like they have low HP, low attack, things like that. Ashis are very expensive, and they stay expensive throughout the game. But it comes with good statistics. Now we're seeing units that are really cheap, really spammable, very powerful, and do too many things. For example, the AZAP, a new unit that has been added into the Ottoman rework. It is a bow and it is a pike. Normally, any other European or any civilization would need 2 units in their composition to cover bow pike. They would need crossbow and pikemen. The AZAP does both. It has 4.5 movement speed, so it can engage or disengage whenever it sees fit. It has multipliers versus heavy cavalry and light cavalry. It has 16 range, so in heavy infantry wars, it can beat musketeers. And with its high speed, it can get into range of other skirmishers with a high rate of fire and deal good DPS. So that is a unit that is fulfilling too many roles. It beats musketeers, beats cavalry, and it trades efficiently with light infantry because it's only 55 food and 35 wood. Not only that, you only need 1 Rax to have 1 unit produced that fills 2 roles. Versus, say, you're playing France and you're doing a double barracks rush, you would need 1 barracks producing crossbows and another producing pikes. And you'd have to manage how many pikes you have compared to how many bows you have. In this case, it doesn't matter. You just have both. And they just do everything. Another example of this, power creep, right? The United States sharpshooter. In Legacy, the Forest Prowler was one of the best skirmishers in the game due to its high statistics and its range of 22 that you could research through a technology. That range of 22 is one of the highest in the games, and it is the highest for a skirmisher. Yes, the longbow can get up to 26 range, but it has a poor firing animation. It cannot kite. The United States sharpshooter has 22 range base, 40% range resistance, which is only 5% less than a Cazador. So you have the range of a Forest Prowler and the premier range resistance of a Cazador. That's taking 2 things from 2 civilizations that were very powerful and made their units unique and strong and adding it into 1 unit. And you can kite with it, and you win the skirmisher war because you get the first shots off, which means you whittle down the opponent's skirmisher mass before they even have a chance to engage, and you can also just kite away and win, which is just it doesn't make sense. I mean, the Forest Prowler is able to do it, but it was also, Haudenosaunee's economy is not the best in the game. But with the United States, which we will continue with in a moment, their eco is incredibly strong and can support a very large skirmisher mass. So those are a few examples. The power creep, where you have units that have no trade-off, they have no downside, because they're able to overperform and do multiple roles as 1 unit. This also leads to another issue. If you have a unit that does too many things, your decision making is much easier, and your actions per minute building an artillery foundry, stable, a Rax, and having different unit compositions, it becomes much smaller, and then you just attack move with 1 unit versus having multiple units in the composition. So let's continue. Another unit, the Haraka. Now, it was originally supposed to be an anti-artillery unit, which is fine, right? But with their high movement speed, they basically became anti-culverin, falconet. But they also have a multiplier against infantry, and with their siege resistance, with high range of 23, they essentially become anti-infantry. Now, it's not much, it's only 24 damage, but you have to remember they have 100% damage done because not many units have siege resistance. And it has range that is better than a skirmisher. So it kind of deals with its counters in a unit that it's not supposed to be able to deal with effectively. So when we think about it, right, something to me that is overpowered is when a unit has other comparable units in its class, like compare the Abyss gun to a skirmisher. When it's overperforming and able to cover too many different roles, like some of the units we just mentioned, the counter system is less impactful, and mono compositions or dual comps become too successful too frequently versus having to play into your opponent. You can just make what you want and blindly and not have to worry about what your opponent does. In a strategy game of RTS, You're playing against another person, and what they do impacts what you do. And in this case, it just doesn't matter. You can make ASAPs and go into skirmishers. Macro. In the civilizations in particular that have auto-producing buildings have been slowly added, right? We have houses in Ethiopia where they have their livestock market that they can just insta convert into wood and coin. So you don't, if you're low on wood or you're low on coin, guess what? 500 in the bank right there. You don't have to worry about chopping wood or allocating and managing your villagers onto different resources. Concha houses, torps, lombards, right? These things auto manage your resources for you. And in a game where you have to multitask your economy and your military, the less you have to do on your plate, the less actions per minute are needed to be able to keep up. Subsequently, on the other hand, your opponent has to do many more actions per minute to be on par with a civilization like Italy. Another example, the Ottomans. In the legacy version of the game, the Ottomans had a poor economy, but really strong military units. And this was a good trade-off. It was balanced. They had to do damage with what they had, but they couldn't produce a lot of units. Now we see that the Ottomans have one of the best economies in the game. They can get 5 town centers. They can get 3 town centers that produce villagers for free at 5 minutes 30 seconds. And the auto production makes it so you don't have to focus on what your villagers are doing. 1 TC on wood, 1 TC on food, 1 TC on gold, and then all you need to do is buy a tech. That's one action in 10 minutes that you need to do to make sure you have constant villager production. And they can use all of the other time that they have not macroing, not selecting the town center, queuing a villager, onto military, scouting, whatever else they want to do. Another thing, walls. Walls are too powerful in this game. And it's not because it is something that is unbeatable. It makes the game a lot more advantageous for the defender. Not just because it buys you time, but because it gives you a line of sight advantage. When you have more than one layer of wall for 5 wood, your opponent has to then either go into artillery, heavy siege, or mortars. All of which, high cost, high population cost, very slow and easily counterable and predictable. So say I'm playing and I put up 4 layers of walls. You've just probably sunk 30 population into making culverins to counter my culverins, mortars or falconets to deal with my walls. Therefore, your mass of infantry and cavalry is small compared to mine. All I need, since your melee units cannot connect, I just need skirmishers and culverins. In the meantime, I can manage my base and do whatever I want. Not only will I win the culverin war because you have to go out into the open where I have line of sight from the walls. My culverins will target you first, I'll click first, and I will lock on for longer. So that 5 wood, which also gives you no XP upon destruction, just cost you 1,000 resources for 2 culverins, and it cost me 5 wood. That is a 995 resource trade for something that takes 5 seconds to build. And my composition is literally just culverin skirmisher, and then I delete your army, I go out with another villager, build another few layers. Very cheap, very cost effective. I now have more map control, and I just rinse and repeat until I'm at your base, and then I build a mortar and destroy your town center and build wherever I want. It's very antithetical to having, and also the actions per minute for that are incredibly low. I'm just sitting in base waiting until you come, and then you make trades that are not conducive to a long run game, and then I will beat you in a war of attrition. So again, macro, map control. Micro, unit compositions, and power creep in the definitive edition are reasons why I have uninstalled this game. And I really enjoy RTS and I really enjoy the definitive edition, but I cannot continue to play a game where the balance is poor, where say you're the Russians and you have to have perfect macro, make no mistakes, not lose too many units, and the United States player you're playing against can make 10 mistakes but still win. It's unbalanced, and I call for the devs to really address these issues.